Hey friends, your pal Mike Shea from Sly Flourish, here with another episode of Sly Flourish's Lazy GM Prep. In this weekly show, I go through steps from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master while preparing for my Sunday role-playing game. Today, we are running the Cypher system for the game world Numenera by Monte Cook Games. I've been running this campaign now, I think it's like 14 sessions or so. And it has been a really good time running this game. Very different than D&D, but still a lot of D&D-ish sort of things that a lot of experiences you can bring from D&D you can apply to this. So this show, like all of the work of Sly Flourish, is brought to you by the patrons of Sly Flourish. If you are enjoying this show and the other work that I do and you want to help me out, you can do so by becoming a patron. Patrons get access to all kinds of exclusive material, little source books, tips and tricks to make their games better, video previews, all kinds of other things. But most of all, they help me put on shows like this. So to the patrons of Sly Flourish, thank you very much. And if you wish to sign up, you can find a link in the show notes below to become a patron of Sly Flourish. Boy, players do things, players do extreme things from time to time. And actually sometimes it's an extreme thing and they might not realize that they're doing it. And that can be a little bit of a trick. So in our current game, the characters are in last session's game, the characters rescued a bunch of nanos. Nanos are like the ninth world and the Numenera equivalent of wizards. They rescued a bunch of wizards who had been taken by these followers of a very powerful entity known as the Fourth Emperor. The Fourth Emperor was using these nanos to build really powerful nanites so it could essentially build a giant portal so it can get through from one world into this world. It's now, the Fourth Emperor is not in this world and is trying to get to this world, and it needs to build a portal to do so, but building a portal like that's big enough and powerful enough takes a ton of work, and they're using a bunch of nanos to do it, so they're using a bunch of nanos. The nanos were all hooked up to these vertices, these connections that combined 4 of them at a time. So 4 people would be connected to these things. And the personalities of all 4 would begin to meld into one super personality. And they needed to have all 4 working at like the neural level together to be able to build these nanos. The problem is when you do that over a long period of time, what happens is that your personalities join and you cannot separate again. You would die if you tried to separate again. Your brains would shatter. So the characters discovered this. They found one of the characters' mother was a facilitator, one that helped them survive this process without dying. And she said the only way to get them is to draw them into the data sphere and their bodies will die, but they'll still be new things. And they did that, and they created these new entities that the party, the characters, the players referred to as quad cores, which I think is a great name. So they are the quad cores. I was pontificating a name for these guys for like 10 minutes last time, and then the player said, how about a quad, or they're like quad cores. I was like, okay, they are the quad cores. So the quad cores are now datasphere only entities. They're kind of tall and large. They look like they're 11 or 12 feet tall. They're sort of, have like a luminescent skin, very featureless. They look kind of like the aliens in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And they don't really understand people anymore. They don't understand single personalities anymore. But Cassandra, the mother of one of the characters, Juniper, she is able to talk to them and kind of communicate with them and tell them what's what and what they can do. And I think there's 5 of them because there were 20 of the, or maybe there's 4 or 5 of them. I think there's 5 of them. And because they are datasphere entities that have super personalities, they are one of the only weapons that the characters can use to crack a herald. A herald is a very powerful super artificial intelligence that works for the Fourth Emperor. And they are represented as large spheres that float both in the physical world and in the data sphere. And they are notoriously difficult to try to crack and fight or do anything like that. They are very, very powerful. So they instead, but the quad cores can crack a herald. They can at least open the door, and then the characters have to go inside and take it over. So that's the big plan, is for them to break in and go over. While they were exploring this area, they found a dagger in a vault, and the dagger contains nanites that belong to a species known as the Hex. The Hex is probably equally dangerous to the Fourth Emperor. In fact, it is the entity that wiped out the Fourth Emperor. And they knew that this dagger was sealed away like in a Faraday cage by the group who had built this facility originally. And one of the players said, I hook it up. I connect it to I have a data port. I said, like, the back end of the dagger changes into a data port that's directly compatible with you because it can use its nanos to change its shape and stuff like that. And he's like, I plug it in. And I'm like, does everybody allow this? And everyone's like, I go up to him and I say, you really want to think this through before you do this. And he goes, I look at them and then I plug it in. I'm like, okay, they had a second chance. I'm like, you plug it in, and I'm like, the swirling red, the red swirling liquid of the dagger just disappears, flows in, and now the dagger is just a hollow crystalline dagger. And they're like, uh-oh. And I'm like, and now his eyes are this swirling red, and he feels perfectly fine. And he's like, what happened? And they're like, I think you have the hex in you now. Right. So then they go and they rescue the nanos, and then they're getting ready to escape. They're getting onslaughted by these huge myrmidons, which are like these big walking armored gorillas. And they're like, we got to get the hell out of here. Let's just dive into the data sphere and leave. And they're like, he can't go. Like, if he goes, the hex will be free in the data sphere. Right. Like right now it's just in him. But if we bring him into the data sphere, who knows what could happen. Right. Like, we have this virus that we know caused an entire dark age for like 100 million years, and we're going to release it into the data sphere? Like, that seems like a terrible idea. And I was like, well, what do you guys plan? And they're like, he's like, I'm going to stay. I'll stay and fight. Right. And I'm like, what's going to happen then? And I was like, you made the choice. We'll find out. And finally, one of the players was like, I have this thing called a frame breaker or frame lock, which can seal something away and sort of, it was a cipher that they picked up previously. And he says, I can seal something away so that it basically locks it away from the data sphere. Can I use that? And I'm like, yes. I said, it's sort of a virtual Faraday cage. You can essentially grab him, suck him into this thing, then bring that into the data sphere, get it out of the data. I said, it only lasts an hour, right? Get out of the data sphere, pop it open, and he will come back out. And it basically builds an isolator around him so that you can get to the data sphere, which was a little, like, would that work? I don't know, right? But it worked well enough because I want the characters. It was a good use of ingenuity for the cipher they had, and I don't want to like really hurt the characters that bad. So I'm like, sure, we'll do that. So then they brought him back up into the open world, and now he's in the open world again. His eyes are still glowing red. Everyone else is figuring like, what are we going to do? They're getting ready to like, okay, we're going to go do the Kessel run or whatever it is. We're going to do the trench run on the Herald. So we got to figure that out, and that's going to be something we're going to figure out today. And we want to figure out what's going to happen with our poor friend who's been, who injected himself with the hex. And I've got some ideas. So we're going to talk about all of that and like, how are we going to go forward with all of these things? But it's very interesting. I'm really enjoying the scope and the scale of the game because it's like, oh, and they never did. There was this other super powerful entity that they said, oh, it'll totally help us. And they left that locked away. So they only took one of the two world-ending. They went to a vault that had two different world-ending entities, the Hex and the Odge, and they left the Odge and just took the Hex. So I only have to deal with now multiple world-ending events through the Fourth Emperor and the Hex, which is great. It's fun. And I didn't know what they were going to do. So I'm enjoying this game because I have no idea where it goes. So we are going to generate a new session planning template. And as always, I am using Notion to do my campaign planning. If you are enjoying or curious about Notion, you can find a link in the show notes for using Notion to do your campaign prep. It's a wonderful system. If you have a system and you love it, I'm not saying you should use Notion, but I really like it. And if you're looking around for one, check out Notion. You can also check out Obsidian. Obsidian is also a really, really good system that does some stuff very much like Notion, but more open sourcey. Like you have better control over the data. So Obsidian works too, but I like Notion. I've already been using Notion, so I'm not going to switch. Sunday, Numenera. So we have our campaign prep notes ready to go. I went through the trouble of writing this out, and now I can't remember if this is, I think they are higher than this now. I'll have to check with them to see. I'm trying to remember like what their current tier and experience levels are. And I want it to progress because I think we're getting close. So I'd like them to get to tier 4 pretty soon. I might have them get to tier 4 today, maybe? We'll see. So first thing we do is we take a look at the characters, and today it's important because we have a lot of character-driven stuff going on. So we have Pat, who is Baiko, who is an intuitive jack who likes to ride the lightning. We have Cecilia, the hideous jack who wields power with precision. We have Jad, the shade, cheerful nano who possesses meddlesome jack who exists partially out of phase. We have Juniper, cheerful nano, who possesses a shard of the sun. I don't know who's not here today. I think everybody might be here. We have Nikia, a beneficent jack who acts without consequence, who's been much more consequential. And we have Sam G1138L, a protective glaive who fuses flesh and steel, and also world-ending devices. So Sam G is the character who now has the hex within him. A couple of interesting things. So Cecilia picked up another cipher that can build sort of a crystalline shell around you and can save her. So she was going to have this limited lifespan, and she just found this crystalline form that can take over the chitin of shell, and now she can live forever. And she's like, maybe I need to bring this to my people. Maybe I can bring this and we can save our kind. So it's very interesting. That was another kind of, I'll tell you, throwing a lot of ciphers around is good because sometimes these ciphers do a lot of interesting things. So the big start today is the hex wishes to negotiate. I think the game is going to start in the Virtus underneath Bodrov. Bodrov is the city that the characters began in. Underneath the city and a bunch of old ruins that exist beneath it, they have a Virtus, their own Virtus, which is their way to cast into the data sphere and cast back out again. And when you do so, it's like Tron. Your whole body goes across and then your whole body comes back out again. So they popped out, and that's where they dropped Samji. And Samji has the hex within him. And I was thinking, like, if you have a character who injected themselves. So one of the things is, like, it wasn't super clear to me that Jay, the person playing Samji, understood the hex and understood what it was when he did it. So I don't want to punish him. He did make the choice, and I don't want to retcon like, hey, you could have chosen not to. But I also don't want to hose him because he didn't really understand exactly what's going on, right? Players only understand about half of what's going on at any given time, and sometimes they, makes a mistake, right? But I don't want it to, like, hose him. So you think about it like, well, from the hard reality of the situation, this is this interesting situation of reality and fun, right? Making your game as realistic as possible for what's going on in the world, but also making sure it's fun. And I think you should start with realism. You should always be focused on what makes this world feel like a solid living world of rules and things that make sense. But then also don't forget about the fun. And if you can twist the reality a little bit to make the fun higher, you should do that. And I think that's what we're going to do a little bit here. The reality is, if you had a virus as virulent as the hex, that is as dangerous as the hex, it probably would have busted out. Well, so there's a few things. It could have busted out originally. Like the minute you leave that Faraday cage, it's out there, right? Particles of it are out there, and the particles can start changing the world, right? So there's that. But you can also, the minute he went into the data sphere, it's like, would a cipher really stop the hex, right? This is a virus that managed to destroy an entire empire and lasted for 100,000 or 100 million years. Would it really be stopped by a single cipher? But you're like, yeah, sure, why not, right? It was smart enough. And it's also like, well, it may not be so super virulent that it takes over immediately. It might take a long time to take over, right? It might take thousands of years to take over because 100 million years is a long time. So then you say, like, okay, well, what is the hex? So to me, the hex, now we understand what the hex is, right? The hex is a sentient nanobots, originally manufactured by the Fourth Emperor. Originally manufactured by the Fourth Empire for complex and self-contained replication. So every nanobot has its own little sentience that sort of grows the more of them there are. It means that the separate hex groups might have separate personalities, right? But they are one of the few super advanced nanites that can engage in self-replication, which is what makes them so dangerous, right? So the pile of hex that is inside of Samji, I think it also, like, when it's in you, when the hex is in you, it can read your mind, right? It can, what is it called? Pwn your mind, right? It has root to your brain, particularly Samji. So it knows what Samji knows, right? It's fully aware of what Samji, it can even unlock parts. I think it did. It unlocked parts of Samji's brain and showed him lots of stuff, right? But I think the hex wants something, right? The hex wants access to the world of the Fourth Empire far more than it wants Earth. So its negotiation is, I know you're really worried about me. Let's make a deal. I won't take over the world here. I won't take over Earth as long as you inject me into the world of the Fourth Empire. They're building a portal. You have to let them finish it. They're building a portal. You have to let them finish it. Then take me to it and throw me inside. Otherwise, I'll start taking over their planet and try to do it myself. So I think that is a reasonable argument. It basically says, like, I'm going to stay here in this fella Sam G. I've got benefits for you and stuff like that. I won't just rapidly propagate across your entire world. But in exchange, you have to take me through Sam G to the gateway of the Fourth Empire and throw me in. You do that, and then I can take over that world, which is far more advanced than this pitiful place, right? I want that way more. And I find that it works better if I work with the sentient entities that are here than it is to just take it over. Because, like, it turns out, I think, like, the hex can war with itself as much as it can war with other sentient entities. That's what caused the fifth age, right? The fifth dark age, the dark age of the fifth age, the darkness of the fifth age. How does that feel? Does that feel pretty good? It gives them agency, right? What you want to do is hand agency back to the characters. You now have this choice you can make, but can they really make the choice? What's the opposite choice? Because they really don't have one. Right? The other reality is, like, the hex could be like, what makes you think I haven't already started infiltrating everything around you? You think I'm just limited to the data sphere? There was a reason they kept me in a Faraday cage, right? And it's like, you're breathing me right now, right? Like, I'm everywhere. I already, so you could already say, like, it's already escaped, right? Like, the minute, I don't know if I want to pull that, because that really feels like, well, what was our point, right? But, the hex should refer to itself as we. Probably. I think so. I mean, does it have a central personality? It's not the Borg, right? It's like different collections of it. I wonder if there's warring personalities among the hex. It's sort of like almost creates like a different plane. So I don't know. Does that feel like a false choice? Does that feel like the players are like, oh, great, we don't have any other choice? I think they're just happy to have a choice, right? Now, is there a way to destroy the hex would be another one. Can the characters use the quad cores to destroy the hex? Is there another way? And maybe Cassandra, through the quad cores, can be investigating a way to potentially destroy the hex, but it's going to take time, right? So we can do that. Because you want to give options, right? You don't want to give false options. Like, well, here's this choice, but you really only have one. But it's like, well, it's better than killing your own friend or throwing him to space or something. It says she can get the quad cores to look for a way to neutralize the hex. So that's an option. So I think that will be a fun start. And then I think the next part, so the scenes are the negotiation with the hex, and then planning the Herald run, the run against Faradon. We'll call it the Faradon run. Then we want to plan this situation, right? So let's jump to the next section, which I think will probably take a session or two. And that's the cracking of Faradon, right? And so what is Faradon? So Faradon is a huge sphere. This is where we think of it from like a situation, like what's the situation, right? We can even create a new section, the Faradon. And the Faradon situation, the Faradon exists both in, we can make these secrets and clues too, right? Some of these I already know. But it, again, never hurts. This both in the physical world and in the data sphere. The Faradon has very limited connectivity to the data sphere. Only a single channel connected to. So this could be kind of fun. I don't know how complex we want to make this, but I have another NPC who I was going to use as like the voice. Cavax, the speaker of the fourth. So there's a connection to Cavax, right? Cavax, the speaker of the fourth. In the newly reconstituted. No, let's see. I don't want to bring back the Temple of Faradon because he nuked it, right? In Cavax's sanctum. They can break into Cavax's sanctum, find Cavax's data connection port to the Faradon, and that's when they look through. So if we have a location, we have Cavax's sanctum, which is sort of like a large, it's like an internal pyramid, right? Internally hollow with tons of data connection feeds to the other Fourth Empire locations and Orgolians. So they break into Kavix's sanctum. That's easy, right? Cracking that is not terribly difficult. Probably a level 5 connection to get inside there. Probably directly openable. Like the quad cores can get right into Kavix's sanctum. So that's no problem. Normally it'd be very hard to get into, but because of the quad cores, they have no difficulty. Then in Kavix's sanctum, that's where there is a data port connection that can let them go up into Faradon, right? And the door, I guess this is a secret, right? The door to crack into Faradon is a level 10. But the quad cores can take this down to a level 6. Right, so it's a level 6. It's still an 18 or better to break through. And it's also defended with ice, right? When I say intrusion countermeasure entities, I think in this case it's just like lightning, like, blasts of lightning will start to like try to disintegrate anything trying to break in. So they get into the port, they have to fire their way up, they have to make a level, there would normally be a level 10 check, right? You got to roll a 30 on a d20, which you can't do. But the quad cores take it down to a level 6, so now it's an 18 or better. And then their own stuff, training in Numenera, training in the data sphere, assisting one another, any other assets that they've got can lower it and lower it and lower it, and then they make the roll and try to break through. They would never be able to do it if they didn't have the quad cores, but with the quad cores, they can actually crack through. Every failure results in them getting disintegrated at a level 6. They take 6 points of damage each time that they fail, so it's kind of tearing them to pieces if they don't make it, but they probably will be able to break in. So then the next question is inside. So if you were a artificial superintelligence from another plane of existence that existed in both the physical world and the data sphere, and somebody went inside your brain, what would it look like in there? Right? What would that be like? I don't know. So I'm kind of taken by Neuromancer, right? And there's a scene in Neuromancer where Case, the main character, uses a virus called the Quang Mark IV to crack a artificial intelligence. And when he hits it, he dies. His pulse goes to 0. His brainwave pattern goes to 0. And he finds himself on a beach. And he's there on this beautiful beach talking to this guy. And the guy's like, hey, what are you doing here, right? And it turns out it's like a kid, right? And in swim trunks. And the kid in swim trunks is the AI that he's been breaking. So there's this cool idea of it could be a hyper-realistic world in there. It could be an opportunity to see what the Fourth Empire, the world of the Fourth Empire looks like. It could be Earth moat kind of crazy stuff, like, a great big void. What would it, probably a sphere within a sphere, right? Because I think the Faradon still considers itself a sphere. And so the intellect of the Faradon is still in there. And the intellect of the Faradon is a physical thing that they're going to have to face. We could, for funsies, let's see, use the cyberspace generator. Cyberspace generator is from the Sly Flourish's Uncovered Secrets Volume 2, available to patrons of Sly Flourish. And we can take a look. This is to build kind of interesting things in cyberspace, right? This can be used for either like a cyberpunk adventure or for Numenera or whatever. So we're going to roll some dice on this and just see what comes to mind. So we could say location 1 is a virtual garden. It could be what if it was like a crazy, like a garden of an alien garden, right? What would that be like? Like pulsing trees. Let's think about this. I kind of like that, right? So we have, inside Faradon, the alien garden. So in the alien garden, you have trees going into eddies. Like this is how it thinks, right? For it sort of floats over this lake, this massive lake of data, right? And it's able to sort of build them into eddies and kind of draw them up and do things with them and let them go. I kind of like that. So you have big trees, a cable. The trees and cables are like connectivity to other places. What else would you find in a garden? probably statues, right? And they would probably attack. So flowers with people instead of flowers. That's not bad, right? So flowers that connect to people, right? To people across, except it doesn't connect to people. It only has that one data port. So maybe it has like a virtual representation of different people. It's virtual representations. It's models of people tended by little mechanical bees, right? These bees kind of fly around and do stuff. And then huge statues of strange squid-like beings that attack. So I think that's pretty cool. They go inside and they find themselves in this massive garden. They look and they see swirling starscapes up above. They see it all kind of like funnel into a funnel that they think is actually like, sort of a connection to the other world. They see all of these different sort of flowers. Each one of them, they can almost hear a voice from the different flowers. There are millions of them, right? And each one of those is a full simulation of an individual, including full simulations of the characters, right? But it doesn't, like, it can't deal with individuals. So it's watching the trends, almost like wind blowing across the flowers, right? I think, it has copies of everything. It's built this simulated world, but it can, one of the things about it is it can't really understand people, right? But I think that's pretty cool. So that's what's inside Faradon. And then I think we'll have like a series of encounters. And this is where I wanted to pull up. Let's see. I threw it in the bestiary this morning. I had two different things that I thought were great. The Tsar. So we have the accelerators, right? This is bestiary 1. And accelerators are on page 20. So these are accelerators. I think they look awesome, right? And they're good and tough. There's probably 3 of these things. 3 level 6s is hard. And those are on, so we have 3, these are sort of the towering statues in the background, right? And we have the other one that I dug with the Tsars. And the Tsars are the keepers, right? They are the ones that, and that's on page 135. Right? And these are little little cybernetic beekeepers. They're level 4s, but I think they're going to be swarms. So I think we'll have like swarms of like level 5 swarms that might attack. Maybe they'll be level 4s. I guess we'll have a swarm of level 4s, right? And they sort of tend to these things, and they will come out and try to cut down the groups. So I think that those will be the 2 big ones. And then there was another, I don't remember where I saw it. One of the other books had it, I think. But I guess we didn't need to worry. So then there's the Faradon itself, right? And I think Faradon is a level 8, right? Very hard. And let's see. I think that they can use some asset. Like this is where, Meeple says it would be kind of fun to actually show the Fourth Empire at this point. That's true. And they might, seeing it sort of floating up in space might be kind of neat. So I think Faradon is level 8, but I think that they can immediately use their friend Takrin. Takrin can be a double asset and take it to Takrin's like, I can help you with this. I can help crack it. And maybe the Hex can be another asset, right? If they're willing to allow it. That can work too. So that can lower it to a 6 and then it can be beatable. And the idea is like they're going to have to fend off like the accelerators, right? Which are really nasty. There's 3 of those things. And there's probably how many swarms? 4 swarms? 5 swarms of Tsars? This is all inside of Faradon, right? And then they crack Faradon. Oh, and they'll see inside Faradon, they also see a data connection, a dedicated connection to the eye, right? And it's probably, so when they're getting attacked, it's trying to locate where they are. And it's probably going to start trying to drop tungsten rods down wherever it thinks the characters might be connected. But if you're in the data sphere, it doesn't know where you are, right? It could threaten, it and say, like, we're going to blow up Scarlet Watch. We're going to kill everything you love, right? We'll blow up Scarlet Watch. We'll blow up Bodrov. And maybe it'll just do so. But it can't get to the hive. The hive, where is the hive, right? I think that's an interesting question. What can it, if it had access to the tungsten rods, what could it do with it? And the answer is not very much, because you're in the data sphere. You're not in physical space. So that's interesting. So what other, I said I was going to do the Faradon situation, but I don't need to do the Faradon situation because I put it elsewhere, because the other steps cover it. So other secrets. We want 3 more secrets, 3 more things that the characters can discover when they're monkeying around with all of this stuff. Is it stuff about the Hex? Is it stuff about Faradon? Is it stuff about the Fourth Empire? So I think they already know this, but just in case, the Fourth FE was using the quad cores to build a portal, very complicated portal to the realm of the Fourth Empire, the Fourth Emperor in the outside. The FE is building this portal underwater. It can't be destroyed with an eye. So I think like when they accomplish this. Oh, so one thing is like, so what possible way? I guess you could have like a subspace connection. I guess that would be it, right? Faradon communicates to the eye through a datasphere connection that travels through the outside. That's why it can't be cracked outside of Faradon. That's an important one. And control over the eye can only happen physically. The characters must reelcast to the eye to take control of it. When facing, I think that's probably good enough. The question: how come we can't control remotely? How did he control remotely? Well, he didn't. He had people up there. There are critters up there that are controlling it, and you have to go up there. I think it will be fun for the characters to go visit a satellite, right? I think it'll be fun for them to be up in space, and then they can come back down again. And from space, they can drop tungsten rods and destroy the Fourth Empire. So if they crack Faradon, which I think they're going to do, and if they get access to the eye, which lets them drop, and there's probably 62 tungsten rods. The eye has 62 rods remaining. So it can fire these tungsten rods down on Earth, and that 62 rods is enough to destroy a third of the Fourth Empire's construction, right? It can set them back centuries. This can destroy a third of the FE's assets on Earth, setting back the Empire for years. Probably not centuries, but for years. Oh, there's another eye, right? There's a second backup eye, but I don't think Faradon has control over that one. There's a second backup eye controlled by another. It must be destroyed before it can, right? So there are 6 satellites, 6 geosynchronous satellites floating around in space. They've been there millions of years. And each pair of them oversees 1/3 of the planet. All right, different positions can look at different parts of the entire planet. And they have a primary and a backup, and the primary and the backup are not controlled by the same herald for that very reason, right? But the minute that Faradon loses control over the eye, the other one's going to try to destroy the eye of Faradon. So what can they do? So they'll have to know that that's going to happen. The first thing they have to do is get control of the eye, pivot the eye, and destroy the other one, right? So that they're the only one. They can't take that one over because they don't have access to it. They'd have to crack a whole other herald. So they have to move very quickly to do this. Takrin, your pal Takrin, wants to be connected directly into the remains of Faradon to become a herald of the characters. I think that'd be very cool. So we got that. We got our locations, NPCs. We have Takrin. He's your pal Takrin. We have Cucuccio. I don't know what Cucuccio is going to do. We have Cassandra. We have Cucuccio. We have Rabbit. Who else? What other NPCs do we think are going to come into play here? Terrence is around. Who else? So Sly and Dar might be the other herald. Oh, we have Kavix, right? Any other NPC? I think that is pretty solid for NPCs. I think, we got a lot of NPCs. So we got our strong, and treasure. They'll probably have some random ciphers in Kavix's sanctum and any other treasure. I mean, they're getting, their treasure is they're getting a satellite. They're getting access to a super powerful artificial superintelligence. They're getting access to, I was thinking about like a spear that like, it's not really a magic item, but it's sort of like a spear that connects of the quad core, right? That the quad cores can all kind of, they create this like blessed spear, right? And they give the spear, and if you plug it in, the quad cores can then channel through that. And that's what they can use to sort of break into, they can use that to unlock the door. But they're pretty well loaded with magic items at this point. So I don't think I'm going to worry about that. So I got my monsters. I've got treasure. I've got big pile of secrets and clues. I've got fantastic locations. I think I have a good understanding of what the situation is like, I think. Like, again, I think it always helps to think about, like, well, how is this place in the world? Like, what's this place like in the world? And how does that operate? And I think we're also, I think we're coming closer to the conclusion of the campaign. I think somebody had asked previously, like, hey, where do you think this is going? So where I think it's going is they crack Faradon. They get into Faradon, they crack Faradon, they get the eye, they then have access to the eye. They probably use the eye to blow up all of the locations that the Fourth Empire has been building, right? And it's going to be a little hard because it's like there are people there, right? This is like the Death Star. It's like there's a bunch of contractors on the Death Star, right? A bunch of dudes who just wanted to make things. So they're going to have to blow up, but they can set things back significantly by using that. They can blow up other heralds. If they can get control of the other eye, they can blow up other heralds. They can blow up other the skybreakers, which is what's been changing the atmosphere around. They can locate and blow up other facilities, other Orgolian facilities and things like that. They can do all of that. They can hit, almost everything in a third of the world, right? Well, they can at least hit 63 of them, right? Because they have 63 tungsten rods left, or 62 tungsten rods left. So then they blow up all that. That sets it back. And then I think the next step is going down and finding, they're going to go to the gate, right? And they need to go to the gate. They need to figure out, are we going to go there, face the Fourth Empire, and then throw the hex in? And I think at that point they will, that'll be kind of the final conclusion, is going to the gate. It's going to be on big, giant underwater facility and face the Fourth Empire, and then make a decision about what they do, like with the hex and what they do with the portal and everything else. And I think that'll be the end of the campaign. I think we'll call it at that point. So I think that's where we're headed. But I'm keeping a loose hand on that, so we'll see. But I think we're all set. So I want to thank everybody for hanging out with me this morning while I was preparing for my Numenera game. If you enjoyed this show, you can help me out by subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter, supporting me directly on Patreon, picking up any of my books, or subscribing to my videos on YouTube. You can find links to all of these things down in the show notes on both the video and the podcast. For the folks on Twitch, I want to thank you very much for hanging out with me today. Stick around. I'm gonna just get things ready, and we're gonna do the talk show coming up here any minute. So for everybody else, thank you very much. Have a great day. Get out there and play an RPG.